thank you very much, everybody, for joining this session, this IMS session for today. And this will be on IMS and the relational database. So this, setting it straight, this session will be by Robert Recknagel, who is a very experienced mainframe architect and has done a load of support for mainframe database and middleware. He's technically responsible for IMS kicks, DB2, Adibas, Connect extensions, and all sorts for a software company in German, which is an IT service provider for banks, insurance companies, and other financial institutions. He's done a lot of work and presentations recently on the IMS catalog and IMS with managed ACBs, and this one is going to be specifically more about the DDL aspects of modernization for IMS. So just a few points about this particular session. It is recorded, so please bear that in mind. We have a charity, which a couple of charities. If you go onto the website, you'll find a link to a charity giving website for Virgin, and the raffle is for Guide Dogs for the Blind and the National Lifeboats. So if you go on the link from the agenda, that you'll find that. Feedback. We've not got the QR code on the first foil for Robert there, but if you go onto the website, onto the agenda, you can then go onto this particular agenda item. So it's the IMS and Relational Database, and if you click on that, if you actually click on the title, you will get a link to the feedback for this session. So please, we encourage you to use that. So please do that. Final point probably is on the way we do the communication. So if you've got any questions, then please. You can actually, he's being very brave, is Robert. He's letting you interrupt him verbally. But if you do that, then please, I'm going to do unmute all, which means that you have to unmute yourself to ask that question. Alternatively, if you don't want to do it via that, then you can actually just chat to me. But Robert doesn't have access to the chat, so you can just field those questions to me if you don't want to announce it and unmute yourself in the actual session itself. Okay, so I think we've covered those main points, and I think I'll over to Robert. I've given the introduction as I know for you, so away you go, Robert. Thanks.
Thanks, Dominic, for introducing me. Dominic already mentioned my name is Robert Recknagel. I'm the senior architect for mainframe databases and middleware at FITS. FITS is a German IT service provider. We are operating a lot of the German system relevant banks and also several insurance companies that are very important for Germany. And my responsibility is the mainframe database and middleware area, which means IMS, CICS, DB2 database, and COS Connect. And I'm also one of the drivers for mainframe modernization in our company and supporting our customers with application side modernization on the mainframe as well. The topic today is, as Dominic already mentioned, DDL. I hope you all have seen IMS managed ACB presentation done by Deepak Kohli or somebody else from IBM in the past. So you have some basic knowledge about the technology that is DDL is being based on, but I will do some small introduction into the managed ACP infrastructure before I get into the DDL details. And so hopefully that will help you to get the things back in your mind again. Okay, let's start. So that's the agenda for today. We will first talk about the DDL infrastructure. Then we will have a brief look into the DDL syntax. Of course, you all know the DVD and PSB macros and the complexity in these macros. And the same applies, of course, to the DDL syntax. So we can't get into the details, but we will have an overview, and we will see a few samples as well. The third agenda item is the ways that are currently supported to execute DDL and IMS. Then we will speak about challenges in mixed ACP gen and DDL environments. And finally, we will talk about migrating to DDL only environments, which will be necessary at some point in time in the future. The downloadable version of the presentation also contains several slides on unresolved DDL issues that I am aware of. These are many slides, so if you want to play around with DDL, you may have a look into those slides to be aware of what to do and what not to do. I will also do some small live demos, and the downloadable version of the presentation contains some more slides describing what I'm going to show here. Okay, let's start with the DDL infrastructure. As I said, DDL mainly is technically based on the IMS catalog and the managed ACBs, and that's also what is shown here in this figure. And you can see on the upper side the traditional way of defining DVDs and PSBs with DVD gen and PSB gen. And then running ACB gen, and this is already the combined ACB gen and catalog populate utility, which is being shown here. And filling your control block as it has been done in the past into the ACB lib, and the DVD and PSB metadata also into the IMS catalog. But in contrast to the non-managed ACB systems, you won't have an ACB lib A and B, but a directory instead. And the directory consists of the staging dataset and the 2 or more active directory datasets, which are named DI 1001, 1002, and so on. And instead of traditional online change copy utility and the /modify command or the init online change command, you will use the import command in the managed ACB world to activate the control blocks. On the side, on the downside of this, you see the current ways of running DDL, and there are currently 2 ways to do this, either using IMS Explore or this IMS SQL batch utility. In both cases, you need to have IMS Connect and ODBM in place, and DDL will run under ODBM and will also fill the DVD and PSB metadata into the IMS catalog and create a control block which is being placed in the into the staging directory. Okay, I won't go over the setup for managed ACBs. Hopefully you are familiar with this, but you may not necessarily prepare everything for DDL right with the managed ACB setup. because even when activating managed ACBs, you still can run DBRC using the dbdlib. You can run DLI batch using dbdlib and psblib. You can run your database utilities using the dbdlib. But as soon as you're starting to use DDL, this won't be possible anymore because DDL doesn't update the dbdlib and the psblib. So you need to tell DBRC, DLI batch, if you still have DLI batch and your database utilities, to use the directory instead. And this can be done in the case of DBRC with the change recon command. In the case of DLI batch, you can either reference in your DLI batch jobs or procedures your DFSDF proclib member, or you can use the catalog definition exit, which also will tell your DLI batch to use the directory instead of the DBD and psblib. In the case of the database utilities, it depends on which utilities you are using. There are some utilities who are working like DLI batch, so either a reference to the DFSDF proclib member or the catalog definition exit will do, but there are also some vendor utilities which require special settings to use the directory instead of the DBD and psblib. And in the future, when we will have a DDL only world, it will look like this. You already know from the previous slide the majority of this figure, but IBM has confirmed that in the future there will be a DDL native utility that this utility is not yet implemented, which don't require you to set up IMS Connect and ODBM to run DDL. And this is what I've additionally shown here. But all the traditional DVD and PSB sources, DVD and psblib and ACBgen and ACBlib will go away in the future. Okay, let's come to the syntax of DDL. Even if the IMS lab tried to use as much as possible the industry standards for DDL, of course, there are specifics to IMS, simply due to the fact that IMS is a hierarchical database and not a relational database. So creating DVDs using DDL, you will mainly use 3 different DDL statements. First, the create database statement, which is the equivalent to the DVD macro in the DVD. And then the create table space statement, which is the equivalent to the dataset statement in the DVD. And then the create table statement, which is the equivalent to the sec macro in the DVD. And this definition also contains all the field definitions and DL child and XD field and so on definitions you have in your DVD. Let's have a look into a sample.
Robert,
yeah.
Can I just mention something on that? Is that the redefine? You know, if you've got redefines of your with the field names and things like that, that's all got to be done first, obviously via the catalog conversion.
Not necessarily. So if you today have only search field, key and search fields defined in your DVDs, you are not forced to add all your copybook or PL1 include information into the catalog. That also doesn't change with DDL. Okay. Yeah. You can do this if you want, but you do not necessarily have to, as long as you don't plan to use SQL access to your IMS databases or Java.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's have a look into a sample. I'm pretty sure you all know the IVP database IVP DB1, and this is how the DDL to define this database would look like. So you see a create database statement in the beginning, telling the name of the database and the access type, HIDAM, OSAM in this case. And you have a create table space statement defining the data set in this database. So you always need to have a reference back to the database, which is being done by the in IVP DB1 part of this statement. And then we have a create table statement, and you know the segment is A111 and so on. And the sequence field is named like this as well. And then you have a L child for the HIDAM primary index. And finally, some specifics on the segment, like the maximum length of the segment and the pointer definitions. And that's it. Of course, you need to have the definitions for the HIDAM primary index as well. I left them out here that you can easily read these DDL statements, and it isn't too small. Finally, you need to commit the DDL that the catalog record is being created and the control block is being written into the staging directory. Okay, to modify a DVD, there are also three statements that play a role. There's the alter database statement, which is being used to modify the DVD wide settings. Then there's an alter table space statement to modify the dataset settings. And there's an alter table statement to modify either the segments or the fields below the segments or the L childs or the XD fields and so on. With the alter table statement, you can also add additional fields. You can remove fields and add, for instance, another secondary index and so on. But not only the alter statements can be used to alter a DVD. For instance, if you want to access another segment, add another segment, then you will use the create table statement and not an alter statement to modify the DVD. Let's have another sample. So what is being done here is we are using the IVP database DI21 part, and we are adding another field from the copybook in this case to the database, and the copybook, the field is being named unit price in the copybook, and we are adding, in this case, the SQL metadata to this DVD. So that's a decimal field with a length of 9 bytes and 3 decimal places, starting at position 21, and it's a zone decimal field that is being important for SQL access, that IMS knows how to convert the data into a SQL data type. So this is a sample for adding a field, and in this case, it's just adding the SQL metadata. It's not extending the segment in its length. To delete a data DVD, you will use the drop database statement, and that is a very simple statement, so I don't have a sample for this one. For creating PSPs, you will use the create program view statement. Don't ask me why IBM has named it program view, but this is the equivalent for PSP. And in contrast to defining DVDs, you will use one big DDL statement and not multiple DDL statements. It's to define the DVD. Again, don't ask me why IBM has done this. In my eyes, that's not consistent. But in this case, you have these create schema statements, which are defining a PCB below the PSP within the same SQL, within the same DDL statement, and not as separate DDL statements. So to define an alternate TP PCB, you will use create schema TP. To define a normal DB PCB, you will use create schema DB. I believe DB can be left out in this case. And to define a GSOM PCB, you will use create schema GSOM. And let's have a look into a sample to not confuse you too much. That's a sample from the IVT no IVP transaction. And the PSB, as you all know, is named DFS IVP1. And it contains one alternate TP PCB, which is modifiable and express yes, and one DB PCB on IVP DB1. And that's how it looks like. You should be aware that DDL requires to have PCB names, which is today not necessary. So if you today don't have PCB names in your PSBs, then DDL will use a naming convention like you see here, where it simply tells names them PCB 1, 2, and so on. To delete a PSB, you will use the drop program view statement. And I guess the first question you all have now is, how do I alter, how do I modify a PSB? There's currently simply no DDL statement that allows you to do this. So the only thing you can do today is you can drop and create the PSB again. And if you're doing this in the same commit scope, so before executing the commit DDL statement, then internally IMS will alter the PSB instead of really deleting and creating it again. And again, don't ask me why IBM has done this. It's like it is at the moment. Okay, if there are no questions on the DDL syntax, we will now have a look into how to execute DDL, and we will see some live demos on this and some more examples during these live demos.
So Robert, you were just saying just before then on that delete that actually under the covers it will actually do the amendment, will it?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
That also applies to DBDs. So if you're running a drop and then the DDL statements used to create the control block again within the same commit scope. So before doing a commit DDL, and then under the cover, it will be simply a modification.
Thank you.
And I guess IBM has added the alter statements for DBDs because that is what DB2 admins will do in this case. But they didn't invest in creating these alter capability for PSBs. I know that they are thinking of adding this in the future, but at the moment, you simply need to drop and create again.
Thank you.
Okay, so we come to ways to execute DDL, and one way to do this is, as I mentioned before, running IMS Explorer. IMS Explorer, as you all know, can be used for SQL access to IMS databases, and it can be used for DDL. And you know, I'm already mentioned, you need to have ODBM and IMS Connect in place. And you may not want ODBM to be used for other things by your developers. And then to prevent this, you may set up ODBM security by defining ODBM secure equals R in the common service layer section of your DFS DF member, and create profiles in your AIMS regf class, or if you don't have regf in your similar security product. And in this class, you can restrict the ODBM access to PSBs, and for DDL, the PSB DFS CP001, the catalog update PSB will be used. Okay, then let's go into the first live demo. We will see how IMS Explorer can be used to run DDL. Okay, I hope you can see my IMS Explorer. And what is shown here is a set of create statements to create a DBD. This is a test database I will create in one of our sysproc test environments. And it consists of 3 segments, the department segment, employee segment, and the salary statement segment. And it contains SQL metadata. As you can see, here are a lot more definitions than most of you probably have in their DBDs. And that's why we see here a lot of things like data type and for instance, date patterns and so on and so on. This is being used for SQL access. And we are creating a secondary index on this HALDB, and then we will commit the DDL. And this is also an important thing to know. In contrast to DBD gen, you can't run separate gens on the main database and on the secondary or primary index, or on logically related databases. You need to do all these creates in a single commit scope. Otherwise, DDL will complain that it's incomplete. The references cannot be checked. Okay, let's first connect to the IMS catalog. And we are connected, and now we will run this create database DDL script. I'm not in the right view. Sorry for this. Create database and run SQL, and now we see here the DDL statements have been executed, and we see here that all has been successfully executed. So now let's also create a PSB on this database, which is called DIN PSB, and it contains ordinate TP PCB and 2 DB PCBs, one on the main database, and the other one is using the secondary index. Let's run this create program view. And you see it's also successful. And now this is something which sadly cannot be done using the IMS Explorer. We need to import these, and let's do this with this Spock. It will be done with the import definition source catalog command. And here we are. You can see that the 2 DVDs and the PSB have been imported. Now let's modify them. And we will do an alter, and this alter will add another secondary index to the HLDB. So we modified the segment, the secondary index will target, and we add the secondary index DVD, and then we'll drop and create the program view to add another DB PCB, and in this case, we will also add 2 more GSAM PCBs to it. And let's run this alter. Oh, it has failed. Maybe we had the connection timeout in between. Yes. Sorry about this. This is an issue IMS Explorer has. It doesn't reconnect on its own, even though it tells that it is connected there. And run it again. Now we are successful. And let's do another import to activate these changes. May take a while. Okay, and here you see the main database has been updated. There's another DB PCB, another DVD for the new secondary index, and the PSB has been updated. Now also, now I will also show how to delete them again. And first we will delete the PSB with the drop program view. And you can see it was successful. And now we will drop the 3 DVDs. And this takes a while longer. You can see it was successful as well. Okay, let's switch back to the slides. Of course, IMS Explorer may be nice to use for developers, and in the development stage, maybe also for DBAs or sysprocs. But of course, that's not a solution for production. And the option you can have or the utility to use in production would be the SQL batch utility today. This is a Java-based utility which runs under COS. And to be able to run this utility, you need to set up the IMS Java on demand feature if you haven't done this already. You also need to have Java set up on your CS system if you haven't done already. And if you have set up the IMS Java on demand feature, you need to mount the IMS Java CFS file system, which is part of this FMID. And in this file system, you will find a Java archive called IMS UDB jar, and this one contains the SQL batch utility and the IMS universal JDBC driver, which is being used by the utility to execute DDL statements. And if you don't want to have clear text passwords when running these jobs, then you also need to set up pass ticket support in IMS Connect. And I won't explain this here, but I have a slide in the downloadable version telling you how to do this. And this is how a SQL batch utility job will look like. As I said, it's a Java-based utility, and you will use the so-called JSOS batch launcher to run this utility. This is the program JVM LDM80. This is the 31-bit version, and there's also a 64-bit which ends with 6 in the name. And the parameter will specify the Java class that is implementing the utility, and that's the batch util, and it contains a Java package name in front. Then you have the standard DD card, and this is configuring your Java runtime environment. If your COS colleagues or whoever configures Java in your environment have probably configured Java, you don't need to export Java home and path and lib path, but you definitely need to set the class path, which tells the JVM under which the Java utility runs, where to find the Java code that needs to be executed. And here we are including two Java archives in this class path. The first one, the IRRRECF jar, is being used to create the pass ticket, as I mentioned. And then the IMS UDB jar I already explained. It contains the SQL batch utility and the IMS universal JDBC driver. And then you may set some Java options like a memory limit or so, or a code page. And this is being done as last part of this standard and configurations. Then there is a main args DD card, which is not being used with this utility. But the utility expects under the IMS SQL DD card your connect, DDL, commit, and disconnect statements. And there are some more information about this in the downloadable version of the presentation, but we'll now have a live demo on it. Okay, let's jump back. And I've prepared a job for this. Okay, so you don't see the details because I've hidden it in a procedure, but I already explained the details before. So in this step, you only see the DDL statement we are going to run, and also the connect, the commit, and the disconnect statement I mentioned before are being hidden by the procedure. But as I said, in the downloadable version of the presentation, you will find the details on how to do this. So we simply create another PSB on a database on one of my SQL test database, which is called customer database. And then we will run the import command and activate this PSB. And finally, we will use the SQL batch utility again, but now we will use a SQL statement to actually access the database and get IMS data returned. And that's to show you that the DDL created PSB is really working. So let us submit this. And now we need to switch to SDSF, and it hasn't worked. Why it hasn't worked? Maybe I haven't cleaned up before the test. That seems to be the case. I'm sorry about this. DDL tells that the PSB has been previously defined. Sorry about this. Did the presentation already 3 weeks ago on a different conference, and I didn't clean up. So let us drop the PSB first. So this is what I mentioned before. This would not really delete, but modify, or that's like running another ACB gen. If I will run it in a separate step, it will really delete it before. And this is what we are going to do now. Let us copy this. So we have one step really deleting it and another step creating it again. Okay, we see return code 0. And let's go down. And here you can see the connect statement, which was hidden by the procedure, then the actual drop statement, then the commit DDL statement, and a disconnect statement. Don't wonder about this message. This is a bug in the utility. It tells you disconnecting before committing, rollback is being issued, but it is not rolled back. That is simply an incorrect message. And then we are running the SQL batch utility again, and this is now creating the PSB. And finally, we will import it. And then we are running the SQL statement here, accessing the customer database and getting the first name and the last name of the customer with the number 1 return, and that's my name in this case. So we have used the PSB, we have used SQL access to this IMS database. Under the cover, the JDBC driver will trigger a get unique call. So the SQL statement has been translated to DLI calls to get this segment return, and the utility then will create a SQL result set out of this and print it here. Okay, let's jump back to the slides. Next, I want to explain how IMS currently processes DDL. And as I already mentioned, DDL is being processed under ODBM. So as soon as you have sent your DDL statements to IMS Connect, and IMS Connect has handed it over to ODBM, ODBM will start a so-called database metadata update region, DMU, and this region shows up in your IMS control region as all the other regions. And within that region, DDL will first pass all the DDL statements, and then it will create a new DBD or PSB instance, insert the record or the new instance into the IMS catalog, and the so-called block builder will create a new directory control block and write it into the staging directory. Or in the case of a drop statement, the catalog record that exists is being deleted, and the auto import will remove the corresponding control block from the directory. And after this, the DMU region will be terminated, which is again visible in your IMS control region. And any kind of error during the DDL processing will lead into an automatic rollback of both the catalog and the directory, except there are still some bugs that causes some changes not to be backed out. But these are rare situations. And IBM, of course, has opened APARS to fix this. I already mentioned the auto import during what I described before, and the auto import can be used for newly created DBDs and PSBs as well, and therefore you need to code auto import create in your catalog section of your DFS-DF Proclite member. In contrast to newly created DBDs and PSBs, you can't automatically import your modified DBDs and PSBs. This always needs to be done manually by using the import command I previously used in my live demo. And in case of dropping DVDs and PSBs, always auto import will be used. You have no chance to say IMS, I want this change manually imported. So drop always leads into an immediate deletion of the DVD or PSB, and of course, if it's still being used, then it will cause some failures with your application. Okay, for newly created DVDs and PSBs, you can also tell IMS by specifying auto create yes in the DF member to define your program and database resource definitions for these newly created DVDs and PSBs, but you need to have dynamic resource definition activated for this. And for newly created DEDBs, you can also request IMS to automatically pre-allocate your database datasets by specifying pre-alloc yes in your DDL section of the DFS-DF Proclite member. For other kinds of databases, this is currently not possible. Okay, let's come to some challenges in mixed environments. I guess nobody of you will switch from traditional ACB gen to DDL at one point in time in the future. That's simply because you need to add DDL statements to your source control management systems. If you today have your DBD and PSP sources in such a system, you need to modify your deployment processes to run DDL instead of traditional gens. And of course, you need to train your DBAs and your developers to use DDL instead of traditional DVD and PSP macros. And so during a transition time, you will have a mixed environment. You will use traditional gens, and there may be some people already using DDL instead of the traditional gens. And this can cause a lot of different issues because DDL only modifies the catalog and the directory, but not the DVD lib, PSP lib, and ACP lib. So import may fail after DBD modification has been done with DVD gen and ACB gen, because if a DDL created PSP reference this DBD, it won't be rebuilt through the ACP gen. And it can also happen that the changes being done by DDL can be overwritten by those changes being done by ACP gen and vice versa, and so on. There are several kinds of issues that can happen during this transition time. And you may prevent these kinds of issues by only using DDL in a dedicated DDL test environment, and don't use DDL traditional gens in this environment, or you can use the so-called catalog library builder utility after a DDL statement has been successfully processed. And this utility allows you to recreate DBD or PSP sources or DBD, PSP, and ACP control blocks from the directory after you have executed the DDL statement. So you can use this to have your DBD, PSP, ACP lib containing the same things like the directory. And this utility is being based on the so-called catalog API, but in real, it's not a catalog API. It simply accesses the directory and not the catalog. And there are still some issues with this utility because it doesn't support GSAM DVDs and PSPs containing GSAM PCBs. And at the moment, there's an APAR I expect to close within the next month, which will fix this. But if you have logical DVDs, you will need to wait a longer time for the support in by this utility.
So Robert, I've got a quick question on that. You know, before when you said that you needed to do, if you wanted to do copybooks for the, you'd need SQL to access via SQL. You need and Java. You need to have those, you know, defined in the catalog. So is this catalog library builder utility, is that a way sort of around that? Or do you still have to define your, you know, do all that? Because when you were talking about the development one and then saying if you want to put them into another environment, you said that there was batch SQL where you did the demo.
Yeah,
you did that with the which needs to have the, you know, that's a SQL way of doing it or a Java way of doing it. But would this be a way of circumventing that?
No, not really.
Okay.
So you still need to have the copybook information in your DBD and in the catalog to be able to use SQL. This here
Yeah.
is just a way of getting DVDs and PSBs which haven't been created using traditional DVD and PSB macros and gens.
Yeah.
So if, for instance, if you modify one of your traditionally created DVDs using a DDL alter statement, then your DVD lib won't be up to date anymore, right? And this utility allows you to get an up-to-date control block and DVD source out of the modified directory control block.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, in the interest of time, I won't do a demo on this, but this is how the utility JCL will look like. And as I said, it's simply depending on what is being defined, and this is in DD statement, the source or the actual control DVD or PSB or ACB lib control block will be created by this utility. Okay. Let's come to the migration of to a DDL only environment, which is still far away in the future, but to give you an idea of what will be necessary in the future is you will have to create DDL statements for all your DVDs and PSBs, and you currently have, because DVD and PSB macros once in the future won't be supported anymore. At least this is the direction IBM has announced with IMS version 15. There's still no date yet when this will happen, but at least they announced that it will be happening in the future. So, and to create DDL statements for all your DVD and PSB sources, you can use either IMS Explorer again, which is a one way to do, but maybe not the best way to do for hundreds or thousands of DVDs and PSBs. Nevertheless, I'll shortly show how to do this. I'm pretty sure you all know how to import DVDs and PSBs into your IMS Explorer. Probably several IBMers have done demos on this in past conferences. And if you have imported this using either a catalog connection to the IMS catalog or by using FTP and putting the DVD and PSB sources onto your Windows file system and then importing it into the IMS Explorer. IMS Explorer under the covers will generate DDL, and this will happen into hidden folders, DVD and PSB source folders, and you can make them visible by navigating here to customize view, and there's checkboxes for hide DVD and PSB folders. Don't ask me why they are hidden by default, but if you uncheck these checkboxes, you will see these DVD source and PSB source folders, and they are containing DDL for whatever you have imported. So for instance, this ACDB here has been imported before, and here you can see the DDL for it. It's one of my SQL test databases, why it's containing also SQL definitions. So this is the way using IMS Explorer. There's another way also explained in the downloadable version of the presentation, but this is even more complex. Okay, in the interest of time, I need to quickly go through this. There's also a utility, again, a Java-based utility that can be used under COS to do this for all your DBDs and PSPs at once. And that's the DDL generation batch utility. And this utility also can use either a connection to IMS catalog or DBD and PSP source directories, and it then run and generate your DDL statements into other PDS or PDSE datasets. And you can see it looks quite similar like the SQL batch utility because it's a Java utility. And in the sysin-dd card, you have a connection to IMS catalog in the case you use the catalog as the metadata source. And then you have to specify DVD cat or DVD source and star for everything, or single name for specific DVD, and the same for PSP. And it will create the DDL statements into your DDL DVD and DDL PSP dataset, which is being referenced below. Let us have a short demo on this, final short demo. So again, all the details are hidden by a procedure, and we will create the DVD and PSP DDL statements for one of the DVDs and one of the PSPs. Let me submit this. Why is still being executed? Return code 0. So here the utility tells that the PSP has been generated, the DDL for the PSP and for the DVD. And now have a look into the library. Here we'll see the DDL statement for the DVD. And here we'll see the one for the PSP. And this utility works quite well now. It in the past had a lot of bugs, but if you apply the relatively new APAR PH 18077, then you will probably don't have issues anymore. And yeah, with that, I'll close the presentation. There are a few more details on how to migrate to DDL environments, DDL only environments in the downloadable version, but I believe that's enough for today.
Well, that's excellent. Thanks, Robert, for that. So I've just opened up now, in case anyone was a bit shy, you can, I've just prompted everybody, they can open up just for a brief discussion if they want. It's coming up to 1 p.m. UK time. So, you know, if you've got a couple of minutes, you can still ask your question. So please do so verbally now, and just unmute yourself.
How far off do you think we are from DDL actually being a reality and usable in a, you know, in a real environment? Just your opinion.
So my opinion on this is, and you may get the same impression when you see the downloadable version of the slides containing the unresolved issues, and that we are at least 2 years away from being production ready with this technology. There are still issues. IBM is heavily investing in getting these issues fixed. It is not as worse as when I started to use DDL probably 2.5 years ago, where DDL contained tons of bugs, and even your sysproc test environment was crashing all the time when you tried to use DDL. So there have been tons of fixes in the meantime, and it has become much more stable. And In a lot of usual cases, it works well now, but there are still things to fix before it's production ready. And I guess that it takes IBM at least 2 years to get this done.
Thanks.
That's a great question. And I've just got, it's kind of related, but, you know, for a volume wise, in terms of actually doing transactions with this method, is it, you know, the overhead, obviously the conversion, there's an overhead to do that under the covers. And, you know, what have you done any performance metrics on that? You know, so some users obviously widely vary in terms of like transactions per second, but have we got any metrics?
So the DDL control blocks will be the same, hopefully the same as if you create them using DVD gen, PSP gen, and ACP gen under a managed ACP environment, of course. And these directory control blocks in a managed ACP environment are mostly the same as normal ACP, so you won't see any performance impact to your running applications. But there are differences, of course, in the way you are defining these DVDs, and which is even more relevant, the PSPs. And in some cases, the DVD and PSP and ACP gen is currently quicker. In some cases, the DDL is performing better. So, but I don't believe that this is really impacting your business or will slow down your software releases. I don't see a danger in this. What you should know is that the import command in some cases doesn't perform as well as the traditional online change. And this is something that is known, and IBM works on this, but it's usually only affects very complex kinds of changes where you import a lot of resources at once.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. Good answer. Okay, we've got just briefly any more questions, because it's 3 minutes past the hour. We can probably have one or two if anybody's got any burning extra questions.
Just one here. This is Anders. When you drop a program view and you have a lot of, let's say you're saving 3 PSBs in the catalog, does it drop everything or just the active one?
You are a bit hard to hear. So if I understood it correctly, you want to drop 3 different PSBs, right?
Sorry. No, if you have 3 entries in the catalog for a PSB and you drop it, does it remove everything or
yes,
all of them, or does it only remove? Yeah.
So using the drop command is equivalent to delete PSB or DVD with the ACP gen utility and importing this change or doing the online change right after it. So it will completely remove, and it will completely also delete all the instances you may have in the catalog. If you just want to clean up old DVD and PSP instances in the catalog, then you still need to use the catalog record purge utility to do this. The drop command, the drop DDL statement will remove all control blocks. You may have a not activated one in the staging directory. This will be deleted. You may have an active one in the active directory. It will be deleted, and the complete catalog record will be deleted.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so all versions.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Good question. Okay, so I think we're sort of 5 past the hour now, so I think we'll be wrapping up. But what I'd say is we've got feedback. If you you know, we emphasised that before. So if you go on the agenda website and just click on the link, the title of this particular session, if you just click on that link on the agenda, the avocado color boxes, then you'll get a feedback link, and we'd really appreciate you to fill out those. And also, I think Robert already mentioned that there'll be a, will you have a slightly bigger slideshow which will be downloadable? Hopefully that could be downloadable at some point, so that people can access it. And also there will be a video playback of this actual session, and that will be uploaded via the conference administrators after the conference end. Okay, so I just want to say thank you all for attending. There's been up to 18 people on the session, which was great, and we'd like to give a virtual round of applause to Robert for taking his time today to go through that, including some great little demos, live demos as well. Very brave and much appreciated. Virtual round of applause.
You're welcome, and please feel free to reach out to me. On the first slide, there are contact details if you have further questions on using DDL. And the downloadable version should be available. Maybe Dominic, please check it, but I have uploaded it to the conference portal, and you may let me know if it doesn't work.
Will do. Thanks very much. Thanks everybody.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care. Bye.